My name is Daniel Calperthwaite. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is November 30th, 1998. My home group is the Wake Forest. It's newly, I just changed home groups from the Nightdale group to the Wake Forest Working with Others group that meets at 7 o'clock on Monday nights in downtown Wake Forest. I haven't memorized the address yet. I do appreciate y'all having clocks up there, by the way. That's very, very helpful. And thank you to Pam for asking me. Sorry, at least I left in enough time to get here. So first of all, I want to say welcome to anybody who's new or fairly new to Alcoholics Anonymous. I hope you hear something that makes you want to keep coming back. My best friend in AA up in Oregon, where I spent most of my sobriety, used to say that, and I just really realized how important that is. And if there's nothing else that I say tonight, I hope somebody new feels welcome and hears something from me or one of the meetings that makes you want to keep coming back. So I may not share an inspirational message tonight. I don't have a very interesting drunk log. You may or may not identify. I was a kind of a lazy drunk. I don't have great stories. I got to share this as a speaker out west who describes, he wasn't really dramatic. He was the kind of guy who came out of a blackout and people were like, wow, that looked like that really hurt. And that's what it was like for me. So, anyways, I think I got everything out of the way that I need to get out of the way. Make sure Steve doesn't get me for not saying anything. Anyways, and I do have a sponsor. There you go. I do have a sponsor, Steve, and I sponsor people. I haven't had anybody new in a while, but I do sponsor people. So I'm actually, it was to kind of start my story. We were a military family in the 70s, a Marine Corps family. So I'm not going to go to mention all the places we were at, but let's just say that landed in Jacksonville, North Carolina, around about 76, and at that point, when my dad was still there, Vietnam was still going on, and we didn't have a father around for most of the first 10 years of our lives, not because of anything he had any control over. So we were, it was a tough. I had great parents, but it was kind of tough because they were gone a lot, and my siblings were all a lot older, so I spent a lot of time alone as a kid. And when you're 5 years old and you're wandering around alone a lot on a Marine Corps base, and you wander into dumpsters and into lakes and things like that, just kind of out of curiosity, you find a lot of non-spiritual things, and you do a lot of things that end up on a fourth step later on. We moved around a lot. Marine Corps families do that, and one of the early issues that I had was with relationships was that we moved so frequently that I didn't know how to establish good, healthy friendships. I got used to the fact that people were going to be come and gone in my lives from a short period of time. So, my idea is I got to experience a whole friendship in the course of like 6 months. So I'd suffocate people. So I ran people off, and it made for kind of a lonely childhood. And my family was gone a lot of the time too. I was what they used to originally call a latchkey child. We'd just come home even at 5 years old, let ourselves in, teach ourselves how to cook, do all our stuff on our own, and sometimes even at like 7 years old, nobody'd be home until 11 o'clock at night, and some of that stuff ended up on my fourth step too, because a lot of scary thoughts sometimes when you're alone a lot, but really. The real issue, kind of going back to that relationship thing, is I just never really knew how to be at school. I know everybody kind of shares this. Not everybody. Most people kind of share this. It felt like I missed that day of school where they handed out the book on how to have relationships and how to be in society and how to function and all. Because I just always was a fish out of water. I was awkward. I was awkward to myself. I wasn't even comfortable in my own skin from a young age. And so you get bullied and bad things happen and things like that, and I just didn't really know what to do, and I didn't help that I was a heavy kid, but then about junior high, a couple of things happened. I can't remember exactly which happened first, but I think alcohol actually came first. My brothers melded. My brothers were 5 and 7 years older than me. My oldest brother had just started NC State, I think a year or two before. And they were he and my other brother and some of my oldest brother's friends were having a party down at a trailer down in Swansboro. I forgot to mention that this is all taking place. At this point, we've moved down to Cape Carteret. If you don't know where that is, it's just across the Emerald Isle Bridge down by the coast. So we're in a little trailer. My brother thought it'd be kind of fun to take me out and see what happens if we put some alcohol in me. I don't know what the right reasoning was, but all I knew was I was going to be with the guys. And that didn't happen with me a whole lot. I was usually left out on purpose. So I'm like, take me anywhere, just let me be one of the guys. So I'm there with these guys, and so they give me a few beers, and I didn't really like the taste of it a whole lot at first. But I mean, even before I got the effect of alcohol, I got the effect of the fellowship, of being with other people who were drinking, and it was like, it was intoxicating before I even was intoxicated. And I don't remember too much about how much alcohol got me that night, but, I do remember, I'm pretty sure I got sick that night. But when that opportunity came again a little while longer, and I don't remember how much longer it was, to go out to the beach out on Emerald Isle and go to a party with some people from school. And mind you, I was afraid enough of just the guys and being around them and talking to them, but the women, forget about it. I just said total shutdown, and there's some four-step stuff I did later on over that, fourth and fifth step stuff. Some of it had to do with an abusive sister and all. But I went to this party, and this time they had what we called PJ. I think out west it was called Jungle Juice. Maybe I got them backwards, but it's basically some juice and a whole lot of grain alcohol. But enough stuff in there where you couldn't tell. So somebody handed me a cup of this, and again, when in Rome, everybody else is doing this. They seem to be having a good time. So I'm sitting. Important note: I'm sitting, and I start drinking this, and I have maybe a cup of this thing, and I'm feeling a little bit in my head, and I get up to go get a little bit more, and it hits me. All of a sudden, like all that anxiety and everything I've been experiencing for all the rest of the years of my life, it just melts off, just like sloughs off me. Like those little videos now, like the kid, like the people covered with mud and they get washed off. It's like everything just comes off, and all of a sudden, people weren't so scary. And I could talk to the guys and I could talk to the girls. And I don't know if I was funny, but I thought I was funny. And I just didn't care anymore. And I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta do this every time I get a chance. This is it. I have found my spiritual awakening. And so I threw up in my brother's car that night, which he wasn't any too fond of, but I didn't care. I just knew at that point I had to do more of that. Now, it might have been somewhere in between that I said there was another thing. I got involved with wrestling. I played soccer for years, but I got involved with wrestling, and I lost a lot of weight. And so I also started becoming more socially accepted for that too. And so I started being somebody, not just a target. But it didn't matter anymore. I loved the way that alcohol made me feel. Matter of fact, when I first started reading the Big Book, some of it was, my sponsor had me reading all the beginning stuff, all the forwards and everything else, and the first part's the doctor's opinion. But when I got to that part of the doctor's opinion, when it says men and women, I'm trying to blank on it right now. Men and women like the effect produced by alcohol. I can quote it all the time, but I'm drawing a blank on it right now, which you know the phrase. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. It's so elusive that after a time they can't differentiate the true from the false. And when I read that the first time, I'm like, that's true for me. It was that effect. I thought I drank, throughout my life, or because I did bad in school, or lost a job, or a girl broke up with me. But I drank because of that effect. And I started realizing, when I'm 13 years old, that effect is going to be important for me to get along in life. Because for whatever reason, I'm missing some sort of DNA that allows me to be able to be a normal human being. So, but I was starting to also kind of come into my own and be more socially accepted. I was always a really good student. I should mention I skipped 5th grade, so I was younger than other people, which was a problem for a while. But even that I had started to overcome, and a lot of the other things. And I started, I fell in love with NC State with my brother there. I decided I was going to go there. I started planning that out as a sophomore in high school. My whole life just seemed like it was just fertile ground and all this great stuff. And then my dad took a job in Mesa, Arizona. And so God had other plans. And I didn't know. I didn't know anything. I mean, we didn't have the internet then, so you couldn't really see what things were like out there. But I got dragged out there, and I came from, living by the coast and the ocean and trees and everything else like that in a very conservative, small-town environment to being brought out into what was a subsection. It felt like that L.A. scene you see in all the 80s movies. And I was really not happy. There were things I said I was never going to do. I don't talk about drugs in my story. I just don't usually do that. The only thing I'll say is that I was never going to do anything like that when I was in North Carolina. It was okay to drink. And brother was teaching me how to drink and drive. All that stuff was okay, but other stuff wasn't okay. When I moved out to Arizona, amongst other things, all the rules were out. Anything was okay because I was so fed up. I tried to turn my life around and it just wasn't going well. So I still did well in school, because I knew if I wanted to have the kind of life I wanted to have, I was going to have to do well. So I still did well in school. But I was drinking every opportunity I had at every part I could have, every party I could get to. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, and a lot of folks out here may not know that, a lot of people know that in Salt Lake City there's a lot of Mormons. Mesa, Arizona is the second largest population of Mormons. So I went to high school with a lot of Mormons. Now, I was an officer's kid. My dad was a decently high-ranking officer. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. He was almost a colonel. And again, he was a very stand-up guy, and we were also brought up very traditional Catholics, very much yes sir, yes ma'am, no sir, no ma'am, all that stuff. And so I had the tools for how to put on a really good look good. And I was also from the South, because that's also a lot more common in the South, so I could put on a really good look good. And I was educated. The school, a lot of the schools in the military bases and some of the ones I went to were pretty good. So when I got out to Arizona, everybody thought I was Mormon. Until they saw me at a party. And I'm not bashing on Mormons. That's not my intent at all. But it's just funny because they would think that because, I always had like short haircuts and just everything always looked very, very much like what they used to call a square. But then, after hours, I was a very different person. So I would get to parties and I would actually have to prove to everybody that I was, I would prove to people I was the craziest. I could do that. If nobody else would do it, I would do it. And the problem with that is that I didn't really ever think about the effect that had around the friends around me and my family. And what was also starting to happen with me by this point in time is I was starting to get a little bit more. So when I first started drinking, it was kind of like, I guess, a Jekyll and Jekyll or a Hyde and Hyde. I don't remember which one is the nice one. But like when I would drink, it was a happier time and I would become a little happier. But by the time I got to Arizona, I could get a little bit more of that Jekyll and Hyde. And so sometimes when I would drink, I would become very unpredictable and I would do embarrassing things to people. And I would also become extremely self-conscious and insecure, and I would make scenes sometimes. And then I would become very embarrassed afterwards, which caused me to drink more. And then sometimes I would just shut people out of my life because I didn't want to deal with them. I got to tell you, I'm getting a whole flood of memories right now because it just turns out that I just got back from Arizona, just like last night, which is where I did most of my drinking. So as I'm thinking about that, I'm getting hit by a whole flood of memories of different things around this time. I kind of got to pick them like buses going by, which one I'm going to share. But, I alienated my best friend, at one of the parties. It's one of those things where I went out there and I decided, and probably because in part I probably wanted to leave the party and drive, and he didn't want me to drink and drive, but I would either keep a second set of keys or hide my keys where nobody else could find it because I love to drink and drive, y'all. I did. As a matter of fact, years later, I did when I was in Oregon, I was doing treatment centers. We got asked to do a DUI victims impact panel. And one of the things that I would share is, for me to not have a DUI, I can't drink because if I drink, I'm going to drive. And that was true from, I was drinking and driving almost as soon as I got my driver's license. So it was causing some problems with some of my friends there. But, got out of high school. Wasn't super close to most of these folks. Went off to college. So if I alienated some of them, oh well, moving on to college now. I'm used to moving on. I'm used to being in new places and having to do new things at this point. So I start out college, still doing pretty good academically, but still having difficulty with girls. And that becomes kind of like the bane of my existence. I can deal with a lot of other things, but so I had some bad scenes early on in college. But the one I really want to share, and this is kind of interesting because I just drove past this place. I'm going to talk about just like 24 hours ago, I think, or a little less than that, or a little more than that. I just drove past this place where this took place. So finally got the courage to ask out one girl. I was going to college in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I got the courage to ask out a girl. At this point, actually, let me step back for a second. This is really important in my story. So my freshman year of college, my second roommate, really, after the one I had most of my freshman year, had about 60 days sober when I started becoming his roommate, or when I became his roommate. He didn't last very long with me as a roommate because I shoved it in his face all the time, and they would take me to AA meetings, and I was like the cancer on those meetings. Like I'm the guy who's going to make people want to leave. But we're walking over from our dorm room one night over to the drugstore in Flagstaff to go get somebody to buy some alcohol for us. And at this point, I'm 18 or 19. He's 19 or 20. And I looked at him. I said, Craig, wouldn't it be funny if we got sober before we were old enough to drink? I don't think non-alcoholics have those kind of conversations. Definitely not when they're 18, 19 years old. So I knew from about the time I was 17 that I didn't drink like other people. I knew I needed alcohol, and it had to be around, or I was going to be in a bad place. So I know that in my mind. I don't think about it going on this date, and I'm so excited. And we go out on this date, and we go drive out to this place out on the area called Lake Mary Road outside of Flagstaff. It's like those inspiration point places, just kind of sitting there talking and having a nice time talking. And as we're talking, I start realizing, oh my God, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to have something to drink. I want to just go back. I want to end this date because I can't do this without alcohol. I don't want it. And it was terrifying for me because I'm like, am I never going to be able to have a relationship? Can I never do this? Because all I want to do is drink right now. And I finally got the courage to do this, but that's all I want to do. And so I think I got through a little longer of just talking with her, and it kind of probably hurried things up so we could get back, so I could drop her off just so I could get home and get something to drink. And I think I went home and I just cried. I'm like, I'm absolutely powerless over alcohol. It's absolutely got its teeth into me. So I think that was probably when, by the time I came into AA many years later, I knew I had a problem. I knew I was powerless over alcohol. But I really think that was, and I kind of knew I had an issue before that, but I think that was really when I started feeling that maybe, just maybe this might be hopeless for me. So from there on, it was a lot of, going to college, I got a degree in electrical engineering, drunk and doing some other stuff along the way. And I don't recommend that. I don't remember a whole lot of what I learned in college, but I managed to get out. I managed to anger, we'll say, my advisor and some other folks, and I somehow managed to become the secretary and president of a pretty big organization, and the advisor to that organization happened to be my advisor in electrical engineering too, and I rubbed him wrong more than a few times. And when I graduated, I was just telling this guy I was driving along in Arizona with, when I graduated and went up there, my folks are out there, out there with the ceremony, and they're announcing everybody's names. And I go up, and when they announced my name, my advisor actually said, well, we finally got rid of this one. And that might sound humorous, but I guarantee it was not funny to my parents, because he was serious, and because I'd been, so right before, this is December 94, a year before that, I had a really bad year in 93. The girl I was going to ask to get married broke up with me the night I was going to ask her out, or ask her to marry me. I got really sick and missed some school and took incompletes that fill in that gap a little bit later. I totaled my car. My best friend killed himself. I got my first DUI. I shouldn't have ever gone back to school. So when I went back to school, I ended up failing out. So those backfilled the incompletes that I had. So I was kicked out of college, and then I had a really bad skiing accident. And 93 was just a train wreck of a year. I also did some other things then I was never going to do too. And you would think that all that and getting through all that, and if I talked my way, like we're great lobbyists, we really are. I lobbied my way back into college, and I had one of my best years, my last year, because it was a finish line. But I hadn't really dealt with anything. I hadn't dealt with this relationship that fell apart. My best friend killed himself. A lot of the things, I was basically just kind of putting that stuff off to the side, deal with it later, get through college, finish and start working. But the demons were growing. The demons were growing. And I graduated college, full-blown alcoholic, went to work, Motorola in Phoenix. I didn't get a professional job in engineering because I was so busy drinking that I'd kind of blown off a lot of the opportunities to get internships and other things like that. So I started out working as an operator. So I worked graveyard. I would come home in the morning. I would get off at 6 o'clock in the morning. There was a bar across the street from where we worked at, and you could go in that bar and they would cash your paychecks on payday if you would buy a drink. And I would either do that on payday, or other days I would just go to the store and get some alcohol, drink until I passed out, wake up, take my dog out, work, do it all over again. And that was my life for a while. That's all I did, was just drink and work for a while. I couldn't really see any way out of that life, and I definitely couldn't see any way out of the bottle. And it really, I worked that job until either I thought they were going to be done with me or I was done with them. I took another one I took a job in 1998. Not a bad year, mind you. Where I took a job based on ego and wanted to earn money rather than what God wanted for me. And I got pulled over 3 times in 3 different states for DUIs in 3 weeks, including doing 100 miles an hour down a freeway in Minneapolis on about 8 shots of whiskey and refusing a breathalyzer because they'd already pulled my license in Arizona. So I'm like, well, what are you going to do? The damage is done. Refused to take a breathalyzer test and couldn't even get back out there for the court case. So they just asked me, you ever coming back here? I said, no. They said, good, you're never welcome back here. But all these decisions I made based on ego and in the midst of just alcoholism, and my life's just falling apart. So a series of other different jobs. I finally end up, I got fired from that job. 98 was a bad year too. Lost that job. I had to, for a second DUI, I had gotten that one in Arizona, in that round of 3, which by the way, was on my mother's birthday. And when I got out of jail, she just happened to be in a town I don't usually go, that she never usually goes to. She had me walking up the street to me. And it's like, she's like, how's it going? I'm like, well, not too well. But, also in 98, I got to the point where it's like, taking a bottle of pills while I'm drunk seemed like a good idea because maybe I won't wake up. I wasn't necessarily trying to kill myself. I just really didn't want to wake up. I guess maybe it was a suicide attempt, but it just was really, I just didn't want to be anymore. And it just was low. And it was like all this stuff, you would think that all this stuff would be enough to want to quit drinking. But it wasn't. So I got an 11th hour job right at the end of losing everything I had. I was living in Vancouver, Washington at this point. I've skipped a lot of states I haven't even gone through with y'all. At this point, I've been on all over the country. At this point, I'm in Vancouver, Washington. I got an 11th hour job down in Huntsville, Alabama, Madison, Alabama, actually. My dad leaves his vacation to come out and get a U-Haul truck for me to drive me down there. Insists that I don't drive down there. Says, I will drive you all the way down there, straight through on a U-Haul. Just don't drink on the way down there. Just don't drink. We'll get down there. You're going to get a fresh start. You can do this. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll do that. So he gets out there. We didn't even get out of Portland because Vancouver, Washington's right across the river from Portland. We didn't even get out of Portland before I already had I'd already downed a couple of 32-ounce old Milwaukees and stashed the 12 back in the back. And I just huddled in a small, I was so embarrassed and humiliated. I just huddled in a small ball on the other side of the U-Haul with some gum, so hopefully he wouldn't smell me. Got down to Alabama and just didn't know how I would do it. But at this point, I moved down there, and people will tell you, if you're new especially too, that if you keep moving from place to place and the problem goes everywhere you're going, maybe the problem's not external. Maybe the problem is you, or not. In my case, the problem was me. So I got down to Alabama. Even before I got sober, that started occurring to me that, you know, I knew I was probably powerless over alcohol, but maybe my life's unmanageable by me. And so I get down there, and I have to do some stuff from the state of Arizona. Granted, I got the DUI from Arizona while I'm living in Washington State, and also in Minneapolis, and it's all over the place. But at this point, I'm living in Alabama, trying to do the court work for Arizona. And the guy calls me up, and he says, you know, I need you to go to treatment to get your license back, and I need you to do a few other things to finish out your thing. I said, I have no money to go to treatment. I said, but I'll tell you what, man. And let me take a pause here a second before I finish this and say the day before, this is all the timing. This is God working in my life. The night before, at the end of my drinking, I was a red wine and whiskey guy. And the night before, or 2 days before, I don't remember, I used to buy gallon bottles of Gallo Paisano because it was some of the strongest wine you could get in volume at a regular store, and actually try to sell it off as like it's legitimate. So I'd already had about a half a gallon of wine, maybe a little less, and I would pour wine in big gulps, and I would drink it all the way down when I first got home, drink a whole one down, fill it up, do half of the second one, and then put that down, let that settle in for a little bit, and then maybe get something to eat. Because I couldn't have any food in me while I'm getting that initial buzz going on. Well, this particular night, like I said, I'm about halfway through a gallon of wine. And I've just poured enough to where I know I've just drank enough to where I know I'm going to be sick already. And I'm pouring another one. And I'm already thinking, I'm the kind of drinker, I'm already thinking 2 drinks ahead. And I'm like, it just hits me this one night, just like, I'm going to drink until I pass out every single time. I hadn't actually, believe it or not, it had never occurred to me that until then, it's like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to drink till I pass out every single time. I got a real problem. So it just turns out that I had to call this guy, I forget his name, something Cole. It was Jim Cole down in Arizona, and he wanted me to do treatment. And I said, man, I can't afford it. I said, but let me tell you something, man. It's like, man, I got a problem with drinking. I said, you don't have to tell me. I don't have to go to treatment. I got a problem with drinking. Would you let me go to Alcoholics Anonymous instead of going to treatment? And he said, well, let me think about it. And I said, I sure would appreciate that. So he hangs up and he calls me back the next day, and he says, how soon can you get to 90 meetings? I said, man, I don't have a car. I missed that. Long since gone at this point. No car, no transportation. I'm taking taxis and riding a bike everywhere. By the way, if you're riding a bike to the store and you're coming back with a gallon bottle of wine on this handlebar and 2 12-packs on this handlebar, you might have a problem drinking. He said, I said, so, you know, can you give me a little extra time? I can't guarantee I can get to one every day and all. And he said, this is about August. He said, get me 90 signatures by the end of the year. Now, I don't agree with the whole signature thing and all, but that's just what I had to do. So I went to my first meeting that night. I looked it up, and the Madison Hopeful Group in Madison, Alabama, and my meeting my first night was like one of those stories that parents used to teach their kids about walking up to school both ways and glass and everything else like that. I mean, it was a dark night. There were no lights hardly on the roads at all. There was no shoulder on the roads. It was raining, and I had to rode 4 miles through the rain in that kind of weather on my bike to get to this meeting. But I got to the meeting, and I don't know what it was, but when I walked into the room, they had the banners on the walls, the older style banners on the walls. And I don't know what it was, but for some reason I felt like I was in the right place. So I sat down, and it was a Tuesday night, and it was a 12 and 12 step study. I remember that. I remember what I was wearing that night. And I sat in the meeting with probably maybe 7 people at the group that night. I can't remember exactly what they talked about, but I remember at the end of the meeting, they said, if you don't have a sponsor, stay after the meeting, talk to us about sponsorship and try and maybe get a temporary sponsor. And I'm like, well, I really related with what people said in the meeting. And I said, I think I probably belong here. So I went up after the meeting and I asked them, and I talked to a guy named David T, and he offered to be my temporary sponsor. And right away, a miracle happened for me. That guy I had heard him talking to his people, how he'd gotten this brand new Honda Accord or something like that. He was so proud of. He hadn't had a new car ever, and he's just all excited about it. And he didn't think twice about putting my bike in the back of that car if it was going to scratch everything and giving me a ride home. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. I wasn't looking forward to that ride home. It was bad on the way there. It was going to be even worse on the way home. And he talked to me on the way home, and he shared some experience and said, he said, the way I sponsor is, well, they made sure I had a big book that night. And they said the program is the first 164 pages. Doctor's opinion is pretty important too. And we're gonna go through this book together, and we're gonna work through these steps together, and that's how we're gonna do it. And he said, and tomorrow night when you come out of the meeting, I want you to clean the ashtrays after the meeting. Back in '98, for anybody who doesn't know, they smoked in most of the meetings. At least where I was at, they smoked in most of the meetings. It was I don't know how we did that. It was just a cloud all the time. It was bad. We actually got an air purifier for our home group, and that thing was working so hard you couldn't hear anybody talk in the meeting. So they finally threw in the towel and just had one non-smoking meeting instead to help air out the room. But it gave me the opportunity to clean ashtrays. So the next night he came and picked me up. With my sponsors when I was early on, the way I was sponsored is, listen, I'm the one who needs a ride at a meeting. They don't need it. It's not them needing to come and get me. So they're like, you'll be, the meeting starts at 8 o'clock. So you're going to be outside of the apartment complex at the bottom of the steps at 7:15. If you're not there, we're driving by. That's how it is. So be there and get picked up, go to the meeting, help set up the chairs, do whatever. They didn't tell me not to speak, but they encouraged me to listen because I was new, and I didn't really have a whole lot to share at that point because I was new. And if what I knew and was thinking worked, then I wouldn't be in there. I'm not discouraging anybody else who's new from ever sharing, but it was good. There were a few times I shared, but in general, I was there more to listen. And then after the meeting, I would get up, and I wasn't really comfortable talking to people. And I got to share this too. You might have read between the lines there. I never went through treatment. I sobered up in my apartment. It was not pretty. I may not have had a crazy drunk-a-log of a lot of things. I mean, I did do a lot of other things I didn't get into. But I was, let's just put it this way. When I was 3 or 4 months sober, I went to go see a doctor because I was having some issues. And she went and tested me. And she came back in the room, and I decided to get honest with her. And I said, before you say anything, I think I should tell you that if it's related or not, that I was an alcoholic for about 14 years. And she said, well, it's funny you say that because, either you drank a whole lot last night or you're an alcoholic, you've been an alcoholic because there's still blood in your urine. And this is after 4 months sober. So I thought I had gotten off, but it was not a pretty, it was really, I was chewing on my tongue trying to talk, and it was very uncoordinated. I couldn't. So I wasn't, just kind of circling back to the meeting, being able to clean ashtrays after the meeting and go back to the back in front of the sink by myself was a very welcome idea. I didn't have to socialize or talk to people because by the end of my drinking, I loved at the beginning of drinking that alcohol helped me interact with other people. By the end of my drinking, I really didn't want to because I was too embarrassed at what I would say or do, and I just wanted to be alone. I said I was a lazy drunk. Most of the time, I would stay at home and drink and watch like Nick at Night and lay with my dog, whatever, I didn't, because I knew if I went out in the world, I would get in trouble. So the idea of just sitting there for service work, just cleaning ashtrays by myself at a sink, that was great. But then they started adding people. Then they would have somebody help me, and I'd have to talk with that person a little bit. And so and it would just be very, very small talk. And so I didn't know what was going on, but they were kind of helping me learn how to socialize. And then I moved my way up in the world to where I was allowed to actually make the coffee. Couldn't do that at first, but I could make the coffee and I could do some other things like that. And it was just teaching me. I did not also understand that all that service work was helping me become part of a home group. And if you're new and you don't have a home group or a sponsor, I encourage you to ask people after the meeting and to get those things because they're very important. I would not be here today if it wasn't for those. But so I was already getting involved with service with my home group. I was working through the steps, you know, and we used to stay. People don't do it out here as much, but we used to stay after the meetings and have the meeting after the meeting. We'd stand in the parking lot, you know, hour and a half, 2 hours, sometimes 2.5, 3 hours, just talking about stuff, living sober, crazy things. You know, a lot of us were single too. It didn't hurt, but. You know, so I was starting to learn how to function around other people, but I was still kind of self-consumed. And so I was sitting in a meeting. I was sitting in a meeting one night before the meeting, and my sponsor looks over at me. This is the second sponsor I had, and I'm just thinking about all the things going on in life. I'm just, you know, I'm not living in the moment, which is you want to always try to live in the now because it's the best, safest place to be. But I'm not at this point, and I'm just worried about work, worried about this, you know, I'm never going to meet a girl. I'm never going to, you know, all this. And my sponsor just looks at me and he can just tell I'm caving in. And he just hits me in the ribs with his elbow. He's like, get out of your damn self, excuse my language, and go shake some hands. Stop being so focused on yourself and go see what you can do for other people. I'm like, oh, yeah, good idea. So I get up and I go and I start shaking hands. And I didn't do that tonight because I came in here late, but usually a lot of times I'll come in and try to shake everybody's hands because it helps get Danny out of Danny. And so I started doing that as well too. I don't remember if it was a service position or not, but that was just something I just started doing, you know, and I started approaching 90 days and at 90 days, two things happened. First of all, they said, hey, at 90 days, you know, in my group, you went through the steps. Most people anyways, if they had good sponsorship, you went through, I went through most of the steps. I think I was probably on my 9th step or further at 90 days. And so it's time to chair the meeting. So that was coming up. But even right before that, we used to have a chalkboard. It wasn't a club. It was just a room in a strip mall that had meetings. But it wasn't a club. No, people didn't stay there after hours. People didn't leave their stuff there. There were no anything else like that. But there was a chalkboard, and it told when all the meetings were and who was chairing. You know, you'd write in your name if you were going to chair them and whose birthdays were coming up, sobriety dates and everything was coming up and all. And I used to lean in my chair back against the side of the chalkboard. And it was just a habit. And one night I was leaning back and I realized I'd worked a good day. I'd paid my bills. I was making progress on my debt. I hadn't hurt anybody. I might have even gotten along with some people at work. I'd had a good dinner. I was exercising more. I was comfortable in my own skin. That was crazy. And like my head wasn't chewing on me. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is serenity. This is peace. This is what people talk about. I'm like, man, this is what I've been looking for all my life. And at that point, and mind you, I've never taken a drink of alcohol since I came into AA. I'm very fortunate about that. But that night, I didn't know for sure I would never drink again because I've never said that. But I knew I was sold and I would want to be an Alcoholics Anonymous the rest of my life if God willing, because I just wanted that peace. That, you know, I can't tell you how many mornings I woke up and I just was like, oh, damn, because I didn't want to wake up. I loathed waking up because it meant I had to do life again. And I didn't mind waking up then. I was happy. And I started getting, work situation was a little sketchy, but I was doing the right things. So I could have shared a lot more on the whole work thing. But let's just say a year before this, I was fired when I got those DUIs. I was fired from a job. Kind of hard to be a field service engineer and travel around the country when you can't rent a car because you've lost your license for a year. So they, after working for them for 7 weeks, they're like, we no longer see a purpose for you here. And by the way, here's $12,000 to go away. And I was supposed to have to, no, not 12. That's how much I owed them in relocation that I was supposed to have to pay back. And they were giving me like $6,000 or $7,000 to go away and not do anything. And I hadn't done much. And I'm trying to argue with them and, oh yeah, I'm going to get you and tell everybody and all this stupid, silly stuff. Fast forward a year later when I've gone through sobriety, worked through the steps and all I'm trying to do is work my 12 step and practice these principles in all my affairs at work and be the best person I can be. And, some uncool stuff was going down at work that I was trying to help prevent a really bad thing from happening. And instead they decided they were going to fire me for being basically kind of a whistleblower, when they called me into the office, instead of making a scene this time, the lady starts going through all this, and I just said, Ginny, can you stop for just a second? She said what I said. I never meant to do any harm. I just been trying to do the right thing here. I'm sorry if I did, I'll go, if you want me to just quit instead, whatever, so you don't have to pay unemployment. I would appreciate, if you all be willing to like not put anything down or whatever, if you'd be willing to do that and all, but I didn't mean to cause any harm. And she was really surprised by that. She expected me to really react. But it was a very different response, and that's because I had learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, to try to let God be in control, and that, everything happens in God's plan. And, it was crazy. That turned out that the thing I was blowing a whistle over, by the way, that place went out of business about 6 weeks later. So I was right. That's the important thing to get out of that message. But I had, I worked, my job became looking for a job. And I was, this whole time, I'm going to a meeting almost every day. But I remember going to one night, I'd been looking for jobs everywhere. And at this point, I'd worked at Motorola as an engineer. I forgot to mention I got promoted from being an operator to an engineer there. I'd been an engineer for a couple different places, and I had some experience for a while. And I'm not trying to put down any kind of employment at all, but I was willing to push a broom into 7-Eleven for the rest of my life if I needed to, if I could just stay sober. I didn't care anymore about how much money I made or anything else like that. And I made that peace with God one night. I just kneel on the side of my bed, and I just said, God, whatever you want me to do, I don't care. I just want to be sober. I don't want to ever go back to the way that I was. And I had this absolute just feeling of just liberation. And I went and I told my sponsor the next day, I'm like, man, damn, the coolest thing happened. I had this experience. Like, I'm at peace, man. I'll do whatever God wants me to do. I'll do manual labor, whatever, the rest of my life. And he looks at me, he's like, man, don't worry about it, man. God's got a plan for you. He's got something special in mind. You know, that's great that you're there, but he's got something special in mind. And sure enough, all these places I'd applied to, July 1st of 1999, all these places started calling me. And I ended up getting one of the best jobs in my life. The one I have right now is kind of two, up in Oregon, and just all kinds of miracles started happening. I got really involved when I moved up there. He told me to be careful about, hearing somebody talk really great stuff in a meeting one time and ask them to be your sponsor, waiting to hear, watch them in real life. And of course I didn't do that. So I had some rough experiences with the sponsors at first, but then I was sitting in a district meeting, and one of the guys was actually questioning whether or not we were really following the traditions or we were just trying to spin our wheels to make some money. And I realized, okay, maybe God wants me to hear that kind of a message. And so I got involved with service. The book tells us, why did I do that? Because the book tells us, if sex is troublesome, meaning not just, also meaning like dating and all, is troublesome, we throw ourselves more into helping others. And so I got really involved in service. And then when dating didn't become important, God put my wife in my life. And she's not one of us, and she's also not one of them. She's not an Al-Anon either. She's just who she is. And we've been, this summer we'll have been married 20 years. And, we're not perfect, but we're also not at odds with each other all the time either. I think we've got a pretty decent relationship. We got 3 kids. I'll share, maybe 1 or 2 other quick stories here about some of the miracles of that side of life. The birth of my first child, I skipped a little bit of time because I was so busy in AA I didn't pay attention whether bad or good things were going on. But I had period years that were bad, and in my wife's in my life it was starting with 2006. We had just every 2 years was crazy. So in 2006 on April Fool's Day, I'm coming home from work, and I call my wife and I said, hey, I hate to tell you this, but I just lost my job. She goes, really? I said, yeah, and it's even worse. I just got in a car wreck. She goes, really? I go, no, April Fool's. Within 2 months, I lost my job, and we both wrecked our cars. We're not allowed to joke about things like that anymore. And she's pregnant, mind you, too. She was due in June of 06. And then right after I lost my job, up to about 2 months before he was born, 6 weeks before he was born, whatever, I lost my job. She had serious complications from the pregnancy and was going to die if she didn't have the baby 2 months early. And so they had to force a C-section. And our oldest came out, and he was 4 pounds, and he had to spend 2 weeks in NICU, and she was in an ICU. And when they first moved him off to this ICU, and she's in this one, in 2 different hospitals on either side of town, and I didn't have family in town yet, and I didn't know what was going on. And y'all, I'd never changed a diaper in my life before, and I didn't know if I was going to be the single parent of a premature child, not knowing how any of this works. But I went down into a chapel, and I said, God, I don't know what your plan is. I don't know if your plan is to take her, to take him, to take them both, or leave them both with us. That's your business. I hope you don't, but that's your business. But whatever you do, you got to put people in my life, and you got to show me how to get through this. I mean, that may sound simple to y'all, but if you're ever in that situation, I mean to tell you, that's the strongest faith I've ever had in my life. Because I basically gave everything to God right there. I gave my family to God and said, they're yours. I hope you give them back to me, but they were yours all along, and they're still yours. And, if you're new, don't think I'm a jerk if I say this, but I hope you have some tough stuff going in your life in your first year. I had a lot of crappy stuff happen in my first year, but it all taught me more about faith. And that was, that wasn't my first year, but that, I had other stuff in my first year, but all those trying things, if I got through those things, they just helped kind of amplify my faith. And people in Alcoholics Anonymous came out of the woodwork helping us through that. People were showing up at the hospital. People were taking care of my dog. People were making food for us. People were doing everything from us everywhere, because this fellowship rocks. There's nothing like this thing in the world. There just isn't. And so everything since then, I mean, it's all gravy. I mean, I'll leave you all. One of the things that scared me about getting sober when I first came in is, what do you do when you're sober? Because all I ever did, everything I did was around drinking. So how do you have fun in sobriety? When I got sober, I realized, no, I didn't do those things. I sat on the couch and thought about them or watched other people doing them on TV. But y'all, since I've been sober, I've been to other countries. I've been to meetings in about 16, 17 states and 4 countries. I've had a chance to go lots of places, do lots of things, have amazing jobs. I've got 3 children, 3 teenagers now. I've been a coach. I've done all kinds of different things. Where I work at, I don't know how. I always feel like it's all over my head to be able to do my job, that I'm not even qualified to do my job. And yet I've got the highest ranking in my group for 5 of the last 7 years. I don't know how. God, that's the only thing I can figure out, because I'm not qualified to do my job, yet somehow I'm doing it really well. So, again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. If you're new, stick around, talk to some people after the meeting. Go do stuff with people outside the meetings too. Go bowling, go do whatever, go do some silly stuff, laugh, have some fun with people. My sponsors and I did that, and it helped me stick around. And I'm really grateful to be here. I didn't know how the talk was going to go tonight. I don't know how it went. I don't care, but I had a good time. So thank you again, Pam, and appreciate y'all letting me talk.